Hi there, welcome to Rose Tinted Gaming. My name is Hunter, and today we're going to continue our playthrough of Sly Cooper and the Thievius Raccoonus. Last time, we made it through Raleigh's somewhat guarded gateway. Now, however, we're going to start exploring his hideout in full. So let us begin. Starting off, remember how last time I mentioned that the level began with a Breath of the Wild moment? Yeah, that's going to be a running theme through this game. We're not actually even in a real level yet. We're inside the world's hub. But, as always, the game starts us off with this blocked view, so that Bentley can give us a nice overview of the area in the proper style of a thief casing their mark. And of course, the first thing we get to see, front and center, is our end goal, the storm machine.
That blimp looks like the most secured location on this boat. If Raleigh's really as smart as his police files suggest, then that's where I'll find him.
Wonderful idea, but your plan is flawed.
Why?
Because it's impossible to get near him. To access Raleigh's blimp, you would have to sneak through that high-voltage power tube. To do that without getting electrocuted, you'd have to destroy that power generator. And to do that, you'd need 2 more of Raleigh's treasure keys, which are heavily guarded.
Interesting. So when are you gonna get to the impossible part?
Fine. But I warned you. I've marked the areas you need to hit with holographic markers. Follow them to your objectives.
Thanks.
Don't mention it. It's your funeral.
In this cutscene, Bentley explains what the treasure keys are about in full. They essentially act as a way for the game to organically let you play most of the levels in any order that you choose. But the problem with this is that before you're allowed to face the final boss, you have to get all of the keys, which kind of takes the freedom out of it. But I can see why they did it. The devs were proud of something that they made, and they wanted to make sure that you got to see all of it before you got to the end. That, and this game is already relatively short as is. A quick Google search tells me that the average playtime is only about 7 hours, so being able to cut any of that out would practically make the story blink and you miss it. Here in front of us is the first instance of a lucky charm. These exist as sort of the game's health system. As I've said before, everything in this game will kill you in one hit, unless you have a horseshoe attached to you. What's more is that you get another one every time you collect 100 coins. Now, this might seem to trivialize the game, but it's not that bad. You see, if you die at all, then you respawn at a checkpoint without any horseshoes. Well, unless you've died in the same section an absolute load. Then the game gives you a pity one to help you out. By the way, if you ever see a discrepancy between my horseshoes or coin count from one level to the next, just do me a huge favor and please ignore it. I have to play through these levels quite a few times to get the recording right, so discrepancies are no doubt going to be quite prevalent as we go on. But now we interrupt my rambling for a special message from Raleigh the Frog.
I see, chaps. My heartiest congratulations to you all. The storm machine has sunk its 50th ship last month, and the loot has already been unloaded. Our operation is moving along splendidly, with the possible exception being the ground's negligent display below decks, and I demand the boilers stay at full pressure at all times. If you lazy, lowbrow, technically incompetent pack of gutter snipes did your jobs right, we'd have some 100 ships by now. But of course, Fiddly Bones is a fine achievement. Carry on, my boys, carry on.
So this is another instance of the game reminding you who the current villain is. This will happen somewhat regularly as we progress through the hideout and collect more treasure keys. Right now, Raleigh hasn't noticed we're here yet, so this is just a standard, if a bit mean, status report. Later on though, his reports will start to get more desperate and he'll get more and more angry at his guards for not catching Sly. This is brilliant in terms of game design. The game constantly reminds you who you're fighting against and why. So many games leave their threat as just some vague bad person that you need to take down because the game told you to do so. In Sly, however, you constantly get to see, or rather hear, the villains in action, and it's a constant reminder of who you're fighting against and why, which helps give you meaning and gives you some emotion to continue playing the game. Back to the task at hand, however, we find ourselves in the middle of the first hub world. There's a couple things to see here and there, but I've been talking for far too long already, and there hasn't been nearly enough action for my liking. So let's just start the next level. Into the machine we go.
Better close those furnace doors. Jump and press the square button. That'll slam them shut.
And of course, right out the gate, barely 2 steps into the level, we get yet another invigorating instance of jump and hit the circle button. Yes, I know they said square this time, but the spirit is still there. And what's nuts is we're not even close to done with these things. Now is actually a good time to talk about something I've neglected to mention for far too long, that being the soundtrack. You see, for me, the soundtrack is one of the most important aspects in a good game. A phenomenal soundtrack can bring an excellent game to amazing heights, or even bring a bad game up to decent status. As for the soundtrack in Sly, it's, I mean, it's alright. It serves its purpose pretty well, but I guess that's why I put off talking about it for so long. But even so, there is something special here. If you haven't noticed yet, the soundtrack in this game is pretty dynamic. Anytime you approach an enemy, it switches from a chilled out stealth backbeat to a bump and fight track, and back again when the threats have been dealt with. Something similar happens whenever you start sneaking along a wall. The soundtrack quiets itself down to hype up how sneaky you're being.
Remember, Sly, hold down the circle button near the blue stealth auras to perform super sneaky thief moves.
Yep, there's another one. They are endless, I swear. When I wrote the line about jump and hit the circle button in the first episode, I was a little bit worried that my memory was overplaying how many of these are, but no, they're everywhere. Why are they everywhere? To introduce the level we're in properly, by the way, Bentley said that we were in the heart of the machine, running everything in Raleigh's hideout, and this crankshaft that I'm standing on will lead us straight to the treasure key. This is actually super cool, because the level actually walks you through the working of this machine, and you really do trace the path of this crankshaft all the way to the treasure key. Before I continue to my next point, I just want to quickly say, this guy cheats. I'm certain that you've noticed for every guard I've come across, a really good strategy is to just run up and hit them before they have much chance to react. Can't do that with this guy though. I actually died a couple times in my practice runs because I kept trying to rush through. Here we have a section I have lovingly called the panic jump. It's called that because every time I made it this far as a kid, I nearly had a panic attack. What's funny though, is that traversing this bit is completely optional and only awards you clue bottles. To get them all, you have to bounce off of these flaming platforms that drop out from under you as you hit them, which means you have to switch which vent you're landing on each jump. Now, this is a pretty basic platforming challenge, but for my tiny fingers at the time, it was quite the challenge. Messing it up is made all the more aggravating by the fact that there is no possible way to get back up to try again, unless you reset the entire level. So if any of these bottles are missed, then no upgrade for you, try again next time. That little head I grabbed is a 1-up, by the way. In this game, they're practically useless given that getting a game over just sends you back to the beginning of a level, which normally isn't really a big deal. But that said, you'll probably see me grab a handful if they're on the path, because I cannot suppress my pro gamer instincts. In this section, we have what I can only describe as a video game trap. Despite the fact that this is meant to be working machinery, we for some reason have these incredibly electric fans running dangerously close to this rushing water. So I'm gonna have to say that this is pretty handily an OSHA violation, even though they put caution tape down. Either that, or I have very little understanding of how hydroelectric power works. Both are pretty plausible, I feel. Also, I think that it's implied that this is the power source for the storm machine. But how do they get the power to the machine itself? Like, it's a blimp in the sky, right? It's not connected to anything. I don't know. Maybe it makes short landings now and again to recharge while we're busy in a mission. Or maybe Raleigh has an armada of supply helicopters to refuel it while we're not looking. Up here on this catwalk, we see another guard. But I must ask, how exactly did he get here? We had to climb through pipes and across dangerous electric fans to get here, and ya boy is just chillin'? Even to get up on this walkway, we had to climb a tiny pipe. This information leaves me with only one conclusion. All of the guards are forced to go through ninja parkour training in initiation to make up for Raleigh's lack of infrastructural design. I hope you enjoy the last panic jump section, because here we have another one. You gotta watch out though, this one is much harder. Well, okay, it's not harder, but it's definitely slower if you want to get all the bottles. An interesting observation can be brought up here though. These lasers are the only proper security measure we've seen in this entire level. Everything else has been the environmental hazards of machinery and your regular workman guards. The more observational viewer may have noticed that we haven't and won't see any of the actual guard-looking guards. Which means that Raleigh wants this one particular duct super guarded. I am at a loss for words. Let's break that loss with a bit of Assassin's Creed style fun. Oh, wow. We are already at the end of the level. That was way shorter than I remember it being. For the longest time, I was under the impression that this level was gargantuan. Before, when I did my test run to take notes, I was prepared for this to be an extra long video, but I guess that's just those rose-tinted glasses working their magic like usual. Anyways, this area comes in sharp contrast to the rushing rivers of highly electrified water from before. Here we have just tons of lava and large piles of red-hot coals. By rights, that means we have reached the heart of this generator, the place where all that water comes to get boiled. Despite the fact that in the last room, the water was rushing in the opposite direction. Just trust me, if you don't think about it, it makes sense. There's no need to worry. But what's more important is that also in this room is the last few clue bottles. So feel free to enjoy the soundtrack as I grab the last couple ones hidden around before we get our safe upgrade. Ah, yes. While I'm here, this is our first instance of a clue safe. These contain 2 to 3 clue bottles and are normally found right at the end of a level. They're essentially the game's shorthand for the developers saying, yeah, sorry mate, we ran out of ideas for places to hide these, so here's the rest. And of course, right across from it is our safe. Unfortunately, we still don't get a line from Bentley about how he solved the code, but I can almost feel it in my bones that one is coming quite soon.
I can't believe I pieced this one together. Try 227. Interesting. Old Sally Cooper's fast getaway raccoon roll. Stories claim she can move faster rolling than anyone else could on the run. Hold down the triangle button to use this move. Switch between your power-ups using L2 and R2.
Alright, now we're cooking. This here is an actual upgrade to our kit, and if you ask any speedrunner, it's the second best upgrade in the game. If you're walking along a path that has any sort of downward slope, you can use this to start picking up some mad speed. Unfortunately for my younger self, I had no concept for the laws of physics, so I saw that it made you go fast sometimes, and as such tried using it all the time. When I subsequently realized I was moving slower than just walking everywhere, I wrote this thing off as completely useless and never used it again. For the rest of this playthrough, I'm still undecided whether or not to use the raccoon roll. It might be fun to roll around while I'm talking about some long-winded point, as I'm doing right now, but we'll see. Speaking of long-winded points, by the way, I just want to call attention to this sticky goop texture. When I was a kid, this was by far my favorite texture in the game. It just looked so realistic when I first saw it, and I don't know, man, I was infatuated for some reason. But stuff like that, I suppose, just harkens back to this channel's namesake. Before us lies a wheel that spins violently fast. Now, I know I've mentioned OSHA once before, but this is just absurd. That thing is practically on fire and is likely spewing hot fumes and ashes everywhere in this room. Not to mention that its speed can take off one of these poor workers' arms. It is truly incorrigible. So, let's do something about that, yeah? Yeah, that part's always great. Even though it breaks the stealth aspect that the game goes for, it's nice that as you're chasing down your own goal, you're also actively sabotaging the operations of the villains in the process. On a side note though, remember that jump and hit the square button at the beginning of the level? That was set up to teach you a semi-new mechanic, but it is literally only ever present here. And after the entire level's been traversed as well. It's just 5 in a row, and it never shows up again in the rest of the game. After all that finally brings us to our second treasure key. Let's ignore for a moment how weird it is that Raleigh hid it inside of a giant engine of all places, and let's just grab it, yeah? Oh, didn't expect that to happen. Oh well, this game's perfect, ignore it. With that taken care of, we are brought once again to the end of another episode. As always, thank you so much for following along with me and listening to this rambling tale of mine. Next time, we'll carry out a daring heist of an understaffed yet well-guarded treasure trove. See you then.